A 6-year-old girl was dragged straight into the yard by her stepmother and her lover right after returning from the funeral, then had a bucket of water poured over her head under the excuse of washing away bad luck. She clutched her teddy bear tightly, her small legs trembling in front of the house. Suddenly, a luxury car stopped abruptly outside. A wealthy man stepped out, draped his coat over the girl's shoulders, and spoke only one sentence that opened the confrontation in which the wicked would be forced to pay the price. Before we begin, please leave a comment with your thoughts about this story and give us a score from 1 to 10. Are you doing okay today? If there is anything on your mind that you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. Wishing you a few quiet, heartfelt moments as you follow this healing story along the journey of courage and justice. The wooden door closed behind the group that had just returned from the cemetery. The house was so quiet that the ticking of the wall clock sounded like a heavy hammer falling. Emma Collins, 6 years old, clutched a worn-out teddy bear tightly to her chest, her eyes red and swollen. That bear was the last gift her mother had given her before dying in a car accident years ago. And now, her father, Richard Collins, a successful businessman and a loving father, had just passed away after a long illness. Inside the vast house, Emma suddenly felt so small it was suffocating. Karen Collins, 35, the woman who had entered this house only 2 years ago as a stepmother, had spent the morning at the cemetery pretending to sob and wiping her tears endlessly. But the moment the door closed, her face changed completely. Cold and sharp, her eyes turned on Emma without the slightest trace of compassion, as though she were looking at an irritating obstacle. Emma whispered, her voice trembling, Can I clean the house for you, Mom?" Karen turned, let out a bitter laugh, and snapped with a tone dripping with arrogance. "From now on, I'm the lady of this house, the one who makes the decisions. Don't you dare act innocent just to win my pity." Emma froze in place, hugging the bear tighter, her little fingers digging into the frayed fabric. At that moment, the door opened. A man stepped inside, dragging a suitcase that he dropped heavily on the floor. It was Robert Hayes, 38, Richard's younger brother. In the eyes of many, Robert had long been nothing more than a spoiled man who lived in the shadow of his brother. Yet today, he walked in with confidence, as if this house had always belonged to him. Robert dropped into a chair, twisted open a bottle of whiskey already sitting on the table, and took a long swig. Then he looked Emma up and down and spat on the floor. "Hello, Emma. From now on, I'll be here, taking the place of your useless father." Emma gasped and stepped back, stammering, "Uncle, why are you in my dad's house?" "This is my dad's house." Karen turned to her, her voice sharp and vicious, every word striking like a slap across the child's face. "Your father is dead. Do you understand that? In this house, I'm the one who decides, and my man now is Robert. From this moment on, you have no right to speak in this house. Either keep your mouth shut or get out." Emma stood stunned, tears welling in her eyes. Robert let out a contemptuous laugh, his shrill voice dripping with mockery. "Look at you, just a pathetic little freeloader who can't do anything except cry and cling to that ragged teddy bear. Your father was a fool for spoiling you, and now you think you're some kind of princess, more like a ruined one. In this house, you're nothing but an eyesore, a burden everyone wishes to throw out." Emma trembled, clutching her teddy bear tighter. I'll be good. I won't be a bother." Karen suddenly shot to her feet, her eyes flashing with cruelty. She grabbed Emma's arm and snatched up the small suitcase already packed with a few worn clothes. The teddy bear was ripped from Emma's grasp and flung into the yard. Karen stormed out, carrying a bucket of cold water. "Get out of my house. I'm sick of pretending to be your kind-hearted mother, you troublesome little brat. Your father died, your mother died, all because of you. I need to wash away the filth you bring, you cursed child. Just looking at you makes my skin crawl, let alone having you live under the same roof." Emma gasped in panic. "No, Mom, please. I'm so cold. I promise I'll be good. I won't talk anymore." Karen clenched her teeth. "You're not my blood. Don't you dare call me Mom. I'll never accept a worthless parasite like you. I don't want to see your face in this house for one more second. Get out." She hurled the bucket of cold water straight onto Emma. The water drenched her hair and clothes, soaking into her skin until she shivered uncontrollably. The teddy bear lay sodden on the ground, crushed beneath Robert's shoe as he crossed his arms and sneered. Look at that. No different from a stray puppy. Perfectly fitting for her. Emma clasped her hands together, eyes wide with desperate pleading, searching for help. A few neighbors stood at a distance, but as soon as her gaze met theirs, they quickly shut their doors and turned away. No one dared to intervene. Emma collapsed to the ground, clutching the ruined teddy bear, her tears mixing with the icy water on her cheeks. Her hoarse voice broke through the night. "Daddy, where am I supposed to go now?" At that moment, the sound of an engine echoed. A sleek Cadillac pulled up right outside the gate. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a dark suit, his eyes sharp yet filled with shock. He froze, staring at the scene beyond the gate. A 6-year-old girl curled up in the yard, soaked to the bone, her eyes red, clutching an old toy as if it were her last lifeline. His gaze betrayed a pain he could not hide. The man clenched his fist, and in that instant, the memories of his own abandoned childhood rushed back. He took a step forward, his voice hoarse with emotion. "What is going on here?" The man was Ethan Collins, 40 years old, a self-made millionaire often mentioned in financial magazines such as Forbes, Fortune, and the New York Times. He had built a real estate empire spanning multiple states, known as a cold strategist in business, yet secretive about his private life. Few knew that behind that glamorous image, he carried a wounded childhood, abandoned, once living in fear of his stepfather's violence and his own mother's neglect. The gate swung open, and Ethan Collins stepped into the rain-soaked courtyard, frozen in place. His dark suit jacket shifted lightly in the wind as he moved forward. His sharp face, his eyes still stunned at the sight of a little girl soaked with cold water, shivering in the middle of the yard. Ethan slowly removed his coat and draped it over Emma's shoulders. The small frame beneath trembled under the warmth still lingering in the fabric. Emma looked up, her tear-stained eyes flickering with a fragile hope. Her tiny hand clutched the edge of his coat as if afraid he might vanish. Ethan tightened his grip gently on her shoulder, then raised his head. His voice came out hoarse, each word pressed down with restrained anger. "Richard has been gone for less than a day. Is this how you treat his daughter?" Karen blinked, her shoulders trembling slightly. A single false tear rolled down her cheek. Her voice quivered, though it carried an icy edge. "You misunderstood, Ethan. I only wanted to teach her to listen, to behave politely. The girl is stubborn, disrespectful to her uncle. I was only scaring her a little." Robert let out a mocking laugh and blew cigarette smoke in his direction. "I'm her uncle. I suggest you stop meddling in family matters. You already showed up late to the funeral, and now you want to play the hero? This is none of your business, so stay out of it." A cold flash flickered in Ethan's eyes. Memories surged in his mind. At 15, it was Richard, the very friend now lying in the ground, who pulled him out of nights, filled with beatings, out from under the table where he hid from his stepfather's blows. Richard had given him shelter, a real friendship. And now, standing before this scene, Ethan knew it was time to repay that debt. Emma tugged at his sleeve, her voice trembling with fear and desperation. "Uncle, they'll throw me out again. I have nowhere else to go. Please, help me." Ethan looked down at her. In that moment, the fear in Emma's young eyes was the same terror he once carried in his own. He drew a deep breath, then turned back to face Karen and Robert. "She's coming with me," he said firmly, leaving no space for argument. Karen tilted her head, her eyes glinting with malice. She was about to protest, but Robert placed his hand on her elbow and lowered his voice with a mocking laugh. "Let him take her. That little brat will come crawling back, sooner or later." Karen froze, swallowing her anger. Forcing a crooked smile, she muttered through clenched teeth, "Fine. If you want to play the hero, go ahead. Let's see how long you can carry her. She's nothing but a jinx." Ethan didn't respond. He simply bent down, lifted Emma into his arms, and walked straight out through the gate. A sleek Cadillac Escalade was already waiting, its door opening and closing softly behind them. Inside the car, Emma sat pressed against the seat, her small hand clutching an old teddy bear. Her wide eyes shimmered with worry before she whispered, her voice barely louder than a breath. "Sir, are you going to leave me too, like my stepmother did?" Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning pale. Outside, the rows of trees blurred and slipped away. Inside his chest, old memories stirred nights when he sat shivering by a window, waiting for a hand to lift him up, a hand that never came. He swallowed hard, his gaze fixed firmly on the road ahead. Not a single word left his lips. Only the steady hum of the engine filled the silence, and the tension in his hands trembled so strongly that Emma could feel it. The car surged into the darkness, carrying with it a question left unanswered. In Emma's heart, the fear had not yet eased. In Ethan's eyes, past and present collided, signaling a journey whose ending was still unwritten. The car turned into the underground garage. Ethan parked in his reserved spot, cut the engine, and leaned over to open the door for Emma. He placed his warm hand on her shoulder, signaling her to follow. They walked through the lobby where the doorman, Mr. Harris, gave a slight nod. He was in his 50s, quiet and polite. His eyes fell on Emma's soaked clothes, and he looked as if he might ask something, but he held back when he met Ethan's stern gaze. The elevator doors opened. They stood side by side. Emma clutched her wet teddy bear, her eyes fixed on the tips of her shoes. When the doors slid open again, a carpeted hallway led them to the corner apartment. Ethan swiped his card, the light blinked, and the door unlocked. Inside, the penthouse was spacious, with an open kitchen and airy living room, everything neat and orderly. Yet the silence was so complete that the sound of breathing seemed loud. Ethan handed Emma a soft towel and pointed to the chair. "Sit here for a moment, I'll get you something dry." Emma gave a small nod. He brought her a little sweater and sweatpants, then pointed to the bathroom. When she came out, her hair had been lightly dried, the oversized sweater swallowing her frame, making her look even smaller. Ethan warmed a pot of chicken soup, ladled it into a bowl, and placed a spoon beside it. The gentle warmth spread through the air. Emma looked at it, then pushed the bowl back. "I'll only eat a little. I don't want to get yelled at." Ethan went quiet for a few seconds. He pulled out a chair across from her, his voice slow and steady. "Here, you don't have to ask permission just to exist." Emma blinked at him, as if waiting for a condition to follow. "You eat when you're hungry, you sleep when you're tired. No one will scold you for that." She picked up the spoon, scooped a small bite, and blew on it gently. She ate slowly, stealing glances at him between each spoonful. Ethan didn't rush her. He just sat there with his hands folded, as if waiting for her breathing to settle into a calmer rhythm. When the bowl was halfway empty, Emma set the spoon down. "You don't hate me, do you?" Ethan answered after a pause. "No one has the right to hate a child for simply existing." Emma lowered her head, her voice thinning. "They said I was bad luck. You are Richard's daughter, and you are yourself. No one can define you by their cruelty." He stood, took a thin blanket, and draped it over her legs, then quietly tidied up. The clink of dishes was barely audible. Emma whispered, "I won't make the house dirty." Ethan turned back, offering a faint smile. "A house is meant to be lived in. It's not a showroom. Here, you're allowed to make a little mess." Night settled in. Ethan led Emma into the small guest bedroom. The bed was already made. He set a moon-shaped night lamp on the side table and handed her a glass of water. "Do you want to call anyone?" Emma shook her head. She clutched her teddy bear and slipped under the blanket. Her eyes stung, but she forced herself to hold it in. After a while, a tiny sob escaped, no louder than the wind. "Mom, Dad, why did you leave me with them?" Ethan sat outside the door, his back against the wall, his hands clasped together. He didn't knock, didn't intrude. He only listened. The sobs inside grew quieter, breaking off in uneven bursts until they faded completely. His eyes were red. Old fragments of memory stirred painfully. A little boy once counted the steps of a drunken man in the hallway, swallowing his own cries so he wouldn't be discovered. Richard had pulled that boy out of that place, given him something steady to hold on to. Ethan looked at the half-closed door and told himself he would not let history repeat itself. He went back to the kitchen, brewed a cup of tea, sat at the table, and opened his laptop. He typed out a short email to Attorney Anderson, then made a list of what needed to be done the next morning. Confirm the legal status of temporary guardianship, contact Emma's school, arrange a child psychologist, and make the unavoidable call to Karen. Everything had to follow the right order. Not rushed, but not delayed either. He turned off the kitchen light, leaving only the hallway lamp. Returning to sit in front of the bedroom door, he closed his eyes for a few minutes. There was no sound except the steady breathing of a child who had just endured a day far too long. In the quiet, a faint sound came from beneath the blanket. Emma shifted. Her stuffed bear slipped from her hand and knocked gently against the bed frame. From deep inside its worn cotton filling, a fragile clicking noise like metal brushing against metal flickered out, then vanished. Emma was asleep. Ethan didn't hear it. The apartment sank back into silence, as if holding on to a secret not yet ready to be revealed. In the morning, Ethan quietly pushed open the living room door and cleared the bowls and spoons left on the table. He heard the faint creak of a bed, then Emma's bare footsteps. The girl hugged her teddy bear, folding the blanket neatly out of habit from her old home. Emma set the bear down, and by chance noticed a small, loose seam on its ear. She tugged at it. A thin piece of fabric pulled away, revealing something hard stuck inside. Emma slipped her finger in and pulled out a silver USB stick, no bigger than her fingertip. She looked up, her eyes wide. "Uncle Ethan, the bear is torn, and there's this." Ethan stopped what he was doing and came over. He took the USB from her, looked at Emma, and asked, "Do you want to see together what's inside?" Emma gave a small nod, still clutching the teddy bear tight against her chest. Ethan opened the laptop on the kitchen table. He plugged in the USB, and the screen showed a single audio file, named with a date from 1 year ago. He clicked play. From the speakers, Richard's voice came through, shaky but clear. "Robert, what is this bottle of medicine? I don't need this. When I take it, my heart races." "Karen, where did you get this?" Robert's voice answered, cold and flat. "The doctor prescribed it. Take it. You're weak. Don't be paranoid." There was a thin stretch of silence. Then Karen's voice slid in, whispering close to the device. "Let him drink more. Let him die already." Ethan pressed his hand against the edge of the table. Emma blinked fast, then broke into sobs, the question spilling out as if she could no longer hold it back. They poisoned my dad?" Ethan placed his hand gently over the back of hers. He kept his voice low, steady, and firm. "Your father didn't want you to live in fear. He left you the truth." Emma squeezed the bear, her tears soaking into its fur. "Dad knew what they were doing to him? Maybe your father knew he wouldn't survive. He understood what was happening, and he believed someone would protect you and preserve this evidence. Today, that's what I'll do. I'll expose every one of those vile people." Ethan rewound a few sections, listening carefully to the breathing, the clink of a glass, the scrape of a chair. He opened the file properties, took a screenshot, and saved 2 backup copies, one to the hard drive and one to the cloud. His movements were precise, not a second wasted. "Uncle Ethan, if they find out about this, they'll take the USB back, won't they?" "No one can take it anymore." Ethan's gaze was steady, his voice low. "Not even them." He pulled out his phone and dialed a middle-aged man. When the voice answered on the other end, Ethan said briefly, "Anderson, this is Ethan. I need you today. There's audio evidence connected to poisoning and a family dispute." Professor William Anderson was a law professor and an attorney specializing in finance and family matters in New York. He had advised Ethan in several difficult transactions and was known for his meticulousness. On the line, Anderson spoke calmly. "Keep everything as it is. Do not send anything through messages. I will come over. And Ethan, stay calm. Protect the child first." Ethan hung up, then bent down to meet Emma's eyes. "This morning, we are going to have a proper breakfast. After that, a trusted uncle will come to see you. He doesn't talk much, but he always stands on the side of the truth." Emma gave a slight nod. "Uncle, if Dad were still alive, would he be happy that I found this?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Your father would be proud that you were brave enough to face the truth." He placed the USB drive into a shock-proof pouch, stored it in the mini safe in his office, locked it, then sent a short message to Anderson. "Saved 3 copies, 1 offline." Emma wiped her tears with the sleeve of her shirt. She took a deep breath and whispered to her teddy bear, "Mom, I found what Dad left behind. I will hold it tight." Inside Ethan, determination rose tall like a pillar. At first, he had only intended to repay Richard, but from the moment he heard Karen's whisper, he knew this was no longer about gratitude. This was responsibility. Emma was a smaller version of himself as a child, one who had been stripped of a rightful place. He was going to give it back to her. At the same time, in a rented apartment, Karen slammed the newspaper down on the glass table. The news from the night before read, "Millionaire Ethan Collins takes the Collins daughter out of the house." She dug her nails into the edge of the table, her voice hissing through her teeth. "He is challenging me." Robert lit a cigarette, leaned back, and smirked. "Calm down. Don't cry like that in front of the press again. They can see the fakery. You think I don't know that? The girl is with him, and she still holds shares in the company." Karen spun around. "I will sue him for kidnapping. I will say he is exploiting her to seize the assets." Robert exhaled smoke, his eyes narrowing. "Then sue him. But you must drag her back at all costs. If she stays out of reach, our plan will collapse." He lowered his head and spoke softly, as if sealing an unspoken order. "The girl holds company shares. She must be brought back at all costs. Otherwise, our plan will collapse." That afternoon, Ethan's phone would not stop buzzing. His inbox flooded with new alerts, articles, short news flashes, online comments. A picture of Karen standing in front of the house appeared everywhere, her eyes red, clutching a black and white portrait of Richard. The headline scrolled across the screen, "Millionaire Ethan Collins removes child from home to seize assets." Ethan shut off the screen. He poured Emma a glass of warm milk and said quietly, "Finish this, then we're going to the library." Emma nodded, hugging her teddy bear tight, the wary look in her eyes refusing to fade. They walked into the lobby of the public library. The space was hushed, footsteps soft against the floor. At the information desk, a young woman looked up and offered a gentle smile. She was in her mid-20s, hair neatly tied back, a name tag clipped to her sweater. Emily Carter, librarian in charge of digital archives and public records. Her voice was steady and clear. "How can I help you and your little one today?" Ethan set a thin folder on the desk, a copy of the will, stock registration papers, Richard's treatment schedule. "We need to cross-check these. Authenticity, dates, and any irregularities." Emily glanced at the documents, then extended her hand toward Emma. "Hello there. My name is Emily. I'll help you find the right answers." Emma took her hand lightly. Emily turned to her computer, accessing corporate databases, electronic registries, and the hospital's public records. Her clicks were precise. Then her eyes froze on a detail. "Here," she said, swiveling the screen so they could both see. "The stock transfer agreement is dated March 14th. Ethan stiffened. "The day Richard was admitted to the hospital for the second time." Emily nodded. "The hospital records confirm he was under sedation for 48 hours. The signature on this contract could not have been his unless someone else signed it." She printed 2 copies, clipped them, and marked the time discrepancy with a red pen. "I'll create a comparison table, contract dates, hospital entry logs, and Richard's older signature samples. The inconsistency here is significant." Emma's voice was a whisper. "Do you believe me? I'm not lying. They hate me." Emily met her eyes. "I believe you. And I'll help." Ethan exhaled slowly, placing his hand on Emma's shoulder like an anchor. He turned back to Emily. "Thank you. If there are copying fees or record access charges, put them on me." Emily shook her head. "Public records are every citizen's right. I'm just doing my job." She paused, then lowered her voice. "But you should brace yourself for another media strike. I've already seen a second article going up on the local news site. They're telling the story their way." A message from Professor William Anderson came through at that moment. "Keep Emma close. I've filed for a temporary child protection order and notified family court. Prepare duplicates of all evidence." Ethan replied. "We have audio recordings. There are signs of contract forgery. Meeting this afternoon." They moved to the scanning station. Emily guided Emma's small hands to place the papers on the glass and pressed the button. "You're doing great." Emma gave the faintest smile. For the first time that day, her eyes relaxed. Ethan seized the moment to make a quick call to his office. I need the legal team to prepare a comparative report on Richard's signatures from 2019 through 2023. Urgent. The phone rang again. It was an unknown number. A woman's voice introduced herself as a reporter. We want to ask about the kidnapping allegations. Ethan kept his tone calm. I will release a statement once the court issues a temporary ruling. I will not respond outside the legal framework. He hung up, not allowing the next question to spill through the speaker. Emily finished printing, clipped the papers into a folder, and handed it to Ethan. This is the copy for submission. I'll keep the duplicate in the library as required by record regulations. If anyone asks, I'll answer according to the law. Ethan bowed his head slightly. Thank you, Emily. Emily smiled. Thank you for bringing her here instead of leaving her to fend for herself. When they left the library, the evening breeze swept gently through the street. Ethan guided Emma across the crosswalk. He knew Karen would not stop. She had money, lawyers, and cameras ready to record any story she wanted to tell. He tightened his grip on the folder, reminding himself of the rhythm: slow, steady, lawful. Night fell as they returned to the building. In the elevator, Emma rested her face against his shoulder, breathing evenly. Are you tired today? Ethan asked softly. I'm fine. I don't want to go back to that house. You will never have to go back to a place that scares you. The elevator doors slid open, and they stepped into the hallway. Ethan paused for half a second. Across the street, beneath the shadow of the trees, a black car was parked. Its headlights blinked once, then went out, like a deliberate wink. Ethan ushered Emma inside, locked the door securely, and stepped out onto the balcony to look down. In the driver's seat, Robert Hayes held a cigarette between his lips, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the steering wheel. The cigarette glow cut through the darkness, revealing the cold smile at the corner of his mouth. He tilted his head back, as if he knew exactly which apartment had the light on. The two men looked at each other across the silent distance. Ethan did not retreat. He simply drew the curtain closed, made a quick call to the building's security, and sent Anderson a single message. They followed us to the door. Outside, the headlights blinked once more. Then silence. The car did not leave. A quiet threat lingered, waiting just below the building. Ethan drew the curtains shut and dialed security. He instructed them to increase patrols around the lobby and the parking garage. 15 minutes later, the black car finally drove away. Ethan jotted a quick note to Anderson. They showed up in person. The next morning, he took Emma to the library. Emily greeted her at the children's desk and handed her a box of crayons. She leaned toward Ethan and spoke softly. I'll sit with her. Go ahead and take care of your work. Ethan nodded, resting a hand on Emma's shoulder. I'll be right back. Stay here with Miss Emily. Emma gave a small nod, clutching her stuffed bear, her eyes following him until he disappeared behind the shelves. Ethan returned to the old Collins neighborhood. He rang the bell at apartment 2B. The door cracked open. An elderly woman with neatly cut white hair and dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep peered out. She was Dorothy Wilson, the family's longtime neighbor. Sorry to bother you so early. Ethan introduced himself briefly, handing over a business card. I was a close friend of Richard's. I need to hear what you saw yesterday. Dorothy pressed her lips together, one hand gripping the edge of the door as if afraid someone might overhear. She whispered, I saw them. They dragged the girl into the yard. Robert grabbed her wrist, and Karen held a bucket of water. They poured it straight over her head. She was shaking like a leaf. But Dorothy pulled back slightly. I was afraid to speak. They have money. They have connections. I'm scared. Ethan didn't press. He exhaled slowly, meeting her eyes. If you stay silent, Emma will never be free. I'll stand with you. You won't be alone. Dorothy stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she opened the door wider, as if opening her heart. I want to tell the truth, but I need to know I'll be protected. My attorney will arrange protection for witnesses. You only need to say exactly what you saw. Ethan handed her a slip of paper with Anderson's phone number. He doesn't talk much, but he gets things done. They walked to the back lot. Near the edge of the parking area, a man sat on an old wooden crate. wearing a worn jacket with frayed shoulders, turning a piece of dry bread in his hand. He was Frank Miller, the homeless man often seen around the building. Dorothy called out, "Frank, come over here for a moment." Frank squinted at Ethan, instinctively wary. Ethan handed him a cup of hot coffee he had just bought on the corner. "I was a friend of Richard's." Frank accepted it, the warmth seeping into his cracked hands. He cleared his throat. "I saw it yesterday. They dragged that girl like she was a sack. She slipped on the steps, crying without a sound. I wanted to step in, but Robert glared at me. I've got nothing left to lose. But that girl, she doesn't deserve to live like me. I'll tell the truth." Ethan gave his shoulder a firm squeeze. "Thank you." He passed him another card along with a paper noting an appointment time. "This is your meeting with Mr. Anderson. I'll be there with both of you." Dorothy nodded. Frank nodded. The three of them stood in silence for a few seconds, sealing a small vow in the daylight. In the afternoon, Ethan returned to the library to pick up Emma. Emily had already printed a timeline comparison chart. She spoke quickly. "I managed to contact the hospital records department. The timing of the transfer contract doesn't match Richard's sedated condition." Ethan replied crisply, "Good. Tomorrow we meet Anderson. Submit this along with the witness." As night fell, Emma went to bed early, hugging her teddy bear, her breathing steady. Ethan opened his computer in the study. He searched through old emails and service accounts tied to the car Richard's wife used to drive. A maintenance folder appeared. There was a technical report from the manufacturer with a short note in English. BCM, ECU log, abnormal override entries. Ethan opened the attachment. A circuit map appeared on the screen, with strange log entries marked exactly 1 week before the accident. He called a friend who was an automotive engineer and put him on speaker. "I'm looking at some odd logs in the BCM. It's not related to the brakes. Looks like someone tampered with the central control unit, forcing incorrect commands." The voice on the other end answered firmly, "If that's the case, it took serious skill. No amateur could have done it, and they'd need direct access to the vehicle." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I remember Richard often complained that Robert would borrow the car, saying things like picking up his girlfriend or taking it in for maintenance back when Richard's wife was still alive." "So that's it," the friend said briefly. "Keep the raw data intact, print it, make multiple backups. Don't touch the car anymore." Ethan saved copies, printed the files, and placed them in a waterproof pouch. On the cover of the folder, he wrote a single line, "ECU, not the brakes." Likely Robert's handiwork. He leaned back in his chair and glanced through a gap in the curtain. The city lights still glowed, but across the street, under an awning, a dark figure stood motionless. It looked as if the person had been there for a long time, patient enough to wait for someone to slip. Ethan pulled the curtain shut, turned off the light in the study, and left only the nightlight in the hallway. He walked to Emma's room and peeked in. The little girl was still asleep, clutching her teddy bear tightly, a strand of hair falling across her cheek. Ethan whispered, as if speaking to himself, "Robert, you didn't just kill your brother. You took the life of Emma's mother too. You stole happiness. You stole the laughter of a whole family." He locked the balcony door and double-checked the security system. His phone buzzed. A message from Anderson read, "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., bring the witness and the technical evidence." Ethan closed the phone and sat down on the floor, leaning against Emma's door. He shut his eyes for a few minutes. Outside the window, the shadowy figure remained. A tiny spark from a cigarette flared and then went dark. No footsteps followed, but the feeling of being watched lingered, sharp and undeniable, like a shadow pressed against his back. The next morning, the phone rang insistently. Ethan had just opened the curtains when he saw Dorothy's message. The kitchen window was shattered, and a brick lay in the middle of the floor. He called her right away. Dorothy's voice trembled. "Last night, I heard a noise. When I went out, the glass was broken. I was terrified." Ethan told Emma to stay with Mr. Harris in the lobby, then drove to the old apartment. Dorothy opened the door, her hands still dotted with glass shards. Ethan put on gloves and picked up the brick. Wrapped around it was a piece of paper with 3 scrawled words, "Keep quiet." Dorothy exhaled sharply. I know who did this, but I will not take back my words." Before Ethan could put the brick away, his phone buzzed again. A church volunteer reported that Frank had been attacked in the back alley and was receiving first aid. Ethan hurriedly drove Dorothy there. Frank was slumped against a wall, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth, his eye swollen and bruised. He tried to grin. "I still have my teeth, don't worry." Ethan bent down. "Who did this?" Frank shrugged. "3 guys. Couldn't see their faces. They told me to keep my mouth shut. I can't do that." Dorothy placed a water bottle in Frank's hand. "We go together. No one gets left behind," Ethan called the lawyer. On the other end was the calm voice of Professor William Anderson. "Document everything. Take photos of the scene. Get Frank examined so we have a medical report. I'll notify the court about the witness intimidation." By noon, Ethan returned to pick up Emma. She had just come out of the children's reading room, clutching her teddy bear tightly against her chest. When Ethan briefly explained what had happened to Dorothy and Frank, Emma's face turned pale. "It's all because of me. If I weren't here, they wouldn't have been hurt." Ethan froze, then knelt down to meet her eyes. "No, Emma, the guilty ones are them. You don't carry anyone's sin. But they hate me. They hate the truth. They don't hate you." That afternoon, Ethan brought Emma to the law office downtown. On the 14th floor, the brass nameplate read, "William Anderson, Esquire." A middle-aged woman opened the door, introducing herself as Paula Green, the legal assistant. She smiled at Emma. "Would you like some hot cocoa?" Emma gave a tiny nod. Anderson stepped out of the conference room, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a calm, clear gaze. He shook Ethan's hand, then leaned slightly toward Emma. "Hello, sweetheart. In here, the grown-ups will talk about complicated things, but I'll try to make sure you understand in simple words." In the small meeting room, Ethan placed a USB drive and a folder on the table. Anderson plugged in the device, listened to the recording, and arranged the papers in order. Dorothy's prepared statement, photos of the broken glass, Frank's injury photos, the timeline chart Emily had printed, and the technical report on the car's electronic control system. Anderson spoke slowly, almost like counting beats. "We need hard evidence. Testimony in court, recordings with verified digital forensics, and technical proof from the car. I will request a witness protection order for Dorothy and Frank. At the same time, I'll petition to have the child placed in your care under an emergency guardianship." Ethan nodded. "I have enough to start. But the truth about her mother's accident, I can't tell the girl everything yet. She would break." The door creaked softly. Emma stood at the threshold holding a cup of cocoa, her eyes wide. She must have caught half a sentence. "My mom. It wasn't an accident?" The room fell silent. Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder, his voice trembling but clear. "One day you'll know it all. But today, let me carry this with you." Emma looked up, her lips quivering. "Then, did my dad know?" "Your father left what was necessary to protect you. He loved you very much," Anderson added, his tone steady. "Our job is to bring the truth into the light, piece by piece, by the law, at the right time. You are not alone." Emma nodded, her eyes wet but clinging to the words "not alone." Paula entered carrying a thin folder. "This is the petition for a temporary protection order and the hearing schedule." Anderson signed, then turned to Ethan. "Tonight, limit movement in and out. Don't let the girl go outside alone. I've notified the local police about the threats." By late afternoon, they left the courthouse. Ethan held Emma's hand on the way home. Mr. Harris in the lobby looked around more carefully than usual. In the elevator, Emma leaned against Ethan's arm and whispered, "If I have to speak in court tomorrow, I'll tell the truth." Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. "I'll be standing right beside you." Night came. Ethan prepared a simple dinner. Emma ate little, but for once, she did not stop halfway through. After her bath, she sat by the window drying her teddy bear, quiet as if talking to someone invisible. Ethan reorganized the files, checking everything one last time. Backup USB, photos of the scene, technical reports, draft testimonies. The television in the living room switched on to the evening news. The anchor read briskly, "New developments in the custody battle of the Collins child." The screen showed Karen in a black dress, eyes glistening as she stood before the cameras. She spoke clearly, almost rehearsed. "I will fight to regain custody of my daughter. Millionaire Ethan Collins is nothing but a greedy man trying to seize control of the shares." The living room seemed to sink under the weight of her words. Emma turned, clutching her teddy bear tightly. Ethan didn't switch off the television. Instead, he stepped forward, blocking half the screen so that Emma saw only him. "Listen to me," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "Noise is not the truth." The broadcast continued. Bold headlines scrolled across the screen. Outside the window, the city lit up. Another night was falling, and the storm of public opinion had only just begun. Ethan turned off the television, stacked the files neatly, and checked the USB one last time. The next morning, he held Emma's hand as they walked through the gates of the New York County Family Court. The hallway was packed with people. William Anderson walked beside him, carrying a thick case file. He gave a small nod to Paula Green, the paralegal, who was already waiting. A court bailiff, Miller, guided them into courtroom 3. Inside, Judge Patricia Coleman sat high on the bench, her expression stern. To the left stood defense attorney Avery Clark, representing Karen. To the right, in the public gallery, several reporters were present. Karen wore a black dress, her eyes red as she looked straight into the cameras. Robert sat beside her, in a dark shirt, his face carefully set in the role of the kind uncle. The clerk called out the names of the parties. The judge tapped her gavel. "Court is now in session." Attorney Clark rose first. "My client, Mrs. Karen Collins, is a desperate mother. The child was taken from her home against the guardian's will by Mr. Ethan Collins, a powerful businessman. This is an abduction disguised as protection." Karen sobbed right on cue, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. Ethan stood tall, his voice steady. "Your Honor, this child was subjected to psychological abuse. They dragged her outside and threw water on her, as if she were an object. I have witnesses." The judge said, "Bring in the witness." Dorothy Wilson stepped forward, her hands trembling. She introduced herself as the downstairs neighbor. "I saw them pull the girl out." Robert was gripping her wrist. Karen carried a bucket of water and poured it straight over her head. The little girl shrank back and begged. Attorney Clark interrupted. "Do you bear any personal grudge against my client?" Dorothy shook her head. "Number, I was afraid. Afraid because they have money and influence. But the truth is, I saw it happen." Frank Miller came next. He wore a worn knit cap, his voice rough but firm. "I sleep in the alley out back. I heard the child crying. When I looked up, I saw her being dragged and stumbling. I wanted to step in, but Robert stared at me like he would kill me if I moved. I'm saying this because I don't want any child living the way I've had to." The judge nodded, taking notes. Anderson carefully placed the USB on the table. "Your Honor, this is a recording hidden inside the teddy bear left by the child's birth mother. I have verified the timestamps and metadata. With the court's permission, I'd like to play it." The courtroom fell silent. Richard's weary, shaky voice came from the speakers. "What did you put in the bottle? I don't need this. When I drink it, my heart races." "Karen, where did you get it?" Robert's voice, cold as ice, replied. "The doctor prescribed it. Just drink." And then Karen's whisper came, so close it brushed against the microphone. "Let him drink more." A murmur rose and then faded. Robert's face turned pale as he shot up from his seat. Fake, fabricated. Anyone could splice that together. Anderson didn't turn his head. "Your Honor, I have submitted a verification report of the file's origin, the time of recording, and confirmation there are no signs of tampering. This is the attached report." He pulled out another bundle of papers, bound with a red clip. "Furthermore, regarding the death of Mr. Richard's wife, the technical report shows that the central control system of the vehicle had been tampered with. It was not the brakes. The ECU and BCM parameters were altered. Whoever did this had both the skill and access to the car." The judge looked up. "And the source of this report?" Anderson replied. "From the maintenance company, with system logs. It has been authenticated by their technical representative under sworn testimony." Attorney Clark tried to interject. "Speculation. No one has directly named my client," Anderson continued. "Robert Hayes had a habit of helping, by taking the vehicle in for maintenance while the victim was still alive. This is the garage log we retrieved. The entries match the exact time of interference. The judge turned his eyes toward the defense table. Miss Karen Collins and Mr. Quas. Robert Hayes, do you wish to make a statement? Karen's hands clutched the edge of her chair, her voice faltering. I cared about that girl. I was only teaching her. Ethan no longer looked at her. He leaned down and spoke softly to Emma. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Emma took a deep breath, but still rose to her feet. Her voice was small, yet startlingly clear. If they cared about me, they wouldn't have thrown water on me. They wouldn't have laughed when I cried. The courtroom fell silent. Emma's hands gripped the hem of her dress, her eyes no longer hiding behind anyone. The judge watched her for a long moment, then turned to the clerk. Record the child's words verbatim. Anderson presented another document, a timeline chart prepared by Emily Carter. This is the evidence of the share transfer agreement, signed while Mr. Richard was under heavy sedation. He could not have signed it himself. The signature samples do not match. The judge flipped through quickly, his gaze sharpening. The court acknowledges signs of forgery in this civil document. Attorney Clark began to rise, but Robert lost control, snarling. That brat is lying, and he's just after the money. Karen tugged at Robert's sleeve, her hands trembling violently. The judge struck the gavel, his voice firm. Order. With these preliminary findings indicating risk of abuse, the court issues an emergency protection order for the child, Emma Collins, placing her under the temporary guardianship of Mr. Ethan Collins. Furthermore, the court orders the immediate detention of Miss Karen Collins and Mr. Robert Hayes to facilitate investigation into charges of poisoning, child abuse, and asset misappropriation. The next hearing will be scheduled once the district attorney supplements the case file. Karen collapsed into her chair. Robert stood frozen like a stone pillar. The court officers stepped forward, cuffing them with practiced movements. Camera flashes burst across the room. Emma broke down in tears, throwing herself into Ethan's arms. Do I have anyone left? Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her head against his chest. You still have me, and you still have yourself. The gavel struck once more. The noise of the room surged back like a crashing wave, but within that small embrace, a warm silence opened, defying the storm rising through the courtroom. After the final strike of the gavel, Ethan signed the order for temporary guardianship. He put his arm around Emma's shoulder as they left the courtroom, her small hand gripping his and refusing to let go. In the hallway, Paula Green handed over an envelope with the transfer papers and reminded him about the upcoming appointments with the welfare office. Ethan nodded in thanks, then bent down and said to Emma, Let's go home together. That afternoon, a locksmith came to change the lock. The wooden door that had once been slammed in Emma's face now opened with a soft click. She stood at the threshold, her little shoes frozen in place. Ethan laid a hand on her back. From now on, this place will hold no more shadows. We'll turn it into a beginning. Emma drew a deep breath and stepped inside. The old room still carried the smell of paint, and a few empty frames on the wall seemed to wait for new memories to fill them. The next morning, people began to arrive one by one. Emily Carter brought a box of children's books and a few small rugs. Smiling, she placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. Your reading room has been waiting for these books. Dorothy Wilson carried a bag of fabric curtains she had sewn overnight. I'm no expert with my hands, but I wanted the windows to have warm colors. Frank Miller showed up with a new jacket and a toolbox in hand. He smiled faintly. Let me try to build a few wooden shelves. Street skills still work. William Anderson reviewed every paper, every permit, and the plan to transform the house into a community center. And a new face appeared, Linda Johnson, the owner of the Corner Cafe, about 60, with a voice as warm as an oven. She set down a tray of sandwiches and hot soup on the table. I don't have fancy words, but no one heals on an empty stomach. All day, the sounds blended together, hammering, laughter, the rustle of wallpaper. Ethan carried paint cans, Frank climbed ladders, Dorothy measured curtains, Emily labeled books, Linda made cocoa, and Anderson moved from room to room, checking off the tasks that still needed filing. On a whiteboard, Ethan wrote one line and circled it, Harbor Light Center. By evening, Emma stood in front of her room. The walls had been repainted in bright colors. The old bed now had fresh sheets. She touched the surface of the desk, the place where a photo with her father used to sit. "I'm afraid to come in here," she whispered. Ethan leaned against the doorway. "You have the right to be afraid, and you have the right to stay." Emma nodded. She picked up her stuffed bear, set it on the pillow, then turned and said softly, "I want to hang my dad's picture back." The following day, a family welfare worker came by. Miss Rivera, a woman with short hair, carried a look that was gentle yet firm. She asked Emma a few simple questions, jotted down quick notes, and glanced around at the house, steadily taking on new life. Before leaving, she said to Ethan, "The best thing for a child is an adult who is consistent. Keep it up." The week passed. Emma went back to school. On the first day, Ethan walked her to the gate and waited until she was safely in class before leaving. That evening, Emily opened a little reading corner for the neighborhood kids. Frank had just finished building 2 long wooden shelves, the fresh scent of pine lingering in the room. Linda brought over a tray of cookies, warning, "Don't eat too many or you'll get a stomachache," then secretly tucked an extra bag into Emma's backpack to take home. Dorothy sat by the window knitting a scarf, occasionally glancing up to smile at Emma. Anderson received the first document recognizing the house as a temporary community center, though they were still waiting for the full permit. One night, as Ethan was folding a blanket in the living room, Emma stepped out, her fingers twisting at the hem of her shirt. She looked at him for a long time, then asked bluntly, "Do you really want to be my dad? Or is it just because you miss my father?" The room fell silent for several breaths. Ethan set the blanket down and crouched, so his eyes met hers. "At first, it was because of your father. He once saved me when I was a child. I thought I was paying a debt, but now it's because of you. My heart chooses you." Emma bit her lip, her eyes brimming with tears. "If one day you no longer remember my father, would you still choose me?" Ethan gave a faint smile. "I might forget many things, but I will never forget the words I've spoken." By the weekend, a temporary sign reading Harbor Light Center hung on the porch. Curious children from around the block wandered in. Emma, shy at first, grew more confident. She pointed to the shelves of books, handed out crayons, and showed them how to fold paper airplanes. When one boy asked timidly, "Do you live here all the time?" Emma nodded. "Yes, and you can come here every afternoon." Christmas Eve drew near. Linda laid the table, Emily hung paper lanterns, Dorothy set out a bowl of peppermint candies, and Frank built a Christmas tree from old wood. Ethan placed a small box on the table, wrapped in purple paper with a white ribbon. When the house grew quiet, he called to Emma, "Come here, sweetheart." Emma sat down, her eyes moving from the box to him. Ethan nodded. "Go ahead, open it." She untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was a new purple scarf, soft and long enough to drape over her shoulders. Beneath the scarf lay a thin envelope. The paper yellowed with age. Emma pulled it out. The handwriting was familiar, steady. Richard Collins. Her hands trembled as she looked up at Ethan. He gave a small nod. She opened the letter. The first line was written clearly. "If you are reading this, it means the truth has come to light. Trust Ethan, because I trust him more than anyone." Emma clutched the letter to her chest. Outside the window, the Christmas lights flickered on. Inside, the room grew silent for a single beat, as if to let Richard's words rest in the air before anyone breathed again. A new chapter was about to begin, and this letter was the door. Emma folded Richard's letter, placed it into the small wooden box Ethan had made for her, then locked it with the tiny key that hung from the strap on her wrist. A year had passed since that moment. Today, she stood on a chair, tying the last ribbon onto the wooden sign above the porch. Ethan held the ladder, looking up. "Is it steady?" Emma smiled. "It's steady." She jumped down, the purple scarf on her shoulders fluttering lightly. Inside, the Harbor Light Center glowed with warm lights. Homeless children gathered, each holding a cup of hot cocoa that Linda Johnson had prepared. Emily Carter laid out books on the table with a label that read Christmas Gifts. Dorothy Wilson adjusted the curtains she had sewn by hand. Frank Miller switched on the string of lights he had crafted from recycled wood. Professor William Anderson arrived a little late, carrying a thick envelope. Emma ran around the Christmas tree, her purple scarf brushing against her cheeks, her eyes sparkling. She bent close to whisper into the ear of a teddy bear sitting on the shelf. "Today I won't cry anymore." Ethan stood near the door, smiling at her, then looking out at the porch. Memories surged back. The day he had seen the little girl drenched with a bucket of water in broad daylight, trembling, lifting her face as if begging for help. He whispered softly, only for himself to hear, "Richard, I kept my promise." Anderson stepped forward, his voice low. "There's official news." He opened the envelope and handed Ethan a thick court ruling stamped with the seal. Robert Hayes and Karen Collins have been sentenced heavily for poisoning, abuse, and fraud in seizing property. The tampering of the control system in Richard's wife's car has been confirmed. Technical evidence and witness testimony sealed the case. Ethan exhaled, folding the papers closed. "Thank you, Bill." Emily, having overheard, smiled. "Justice may come late, but it never disappears." Ethan called out, "Come here, sweetheart." Emma ran to him and held his hand. Anderson leaned down. "Congratulations, brave girl." Emma nodded, looked at Ethan, then suddenly spoke slowly and clearly, as if declaring something long kept inside. "Dad, from now on I'm not afraid anymore." The whole room paused for a beat. Ethan tightened his hand around hers, his eyes wet. "Yes, my daughter." Linda gave a small whistle. "It's time." The children crowded around the tree. Frank flipped the switch, and the lights burst into brilliance. Dorothy handed out peppermint candies. Emily placed a wrapped book into each child's hands. "Open them together." The sound of tearing paper filled the room, followed by bright cheers, joyful but not chaotic. On the wall, the newly hung board shone under the string of lights. Harbor Light Center, where every child has the right to hope. Emma tugged Ethan's hand, leading him to the corner of the room where Richard's photo was placed with care. She set down a small wooden star that Frank had carved, then whispered, "Dad, I read the letter. I did everything you asked. I believe." Ethan rested his hand on her shoulder. "And you helped many other children believe with you." Anderson leaned close and said quickly to Ethan, "The permanent guardianship papers will be ready after the holidays. The court wants to review a few more procedural items, but it's only a formality." Ethan nodded, unable to hide a faint smile. The children gathered to sing. Their voices were uneven but warm. Emma turned back and raised her hand. "Dad, can we sing together?" Ethan replied, "Lead me in." The two of them stood side by side, their voices joining the crowd, not needing to be loud, only steady in rhythm. Outside the glass doors, snow began to fall, thin as dust. Paula Green, Anderson's assistant, stopped by and handed a small gift bag to Emma, introduced herself, then hurried back to the front office. Emma smiled, thanked her, and placed the bag next to her teddy bear. She turned and hugged Ethan tightly, as if confirming the words she had just spoken. Ethan held her back, pressing his forehead gently against her soft hair. The church bells nearby rang out, deep and steady. The whole center grew quiet for a moment, as if everyone was listening to a single shared heartbeat. Snow on the porch settled over the new sign, glowing beneath the string lights. Emma looked up at the sky through the window, her small hand gripping Ethan's. She spoke clearly now, no longer trembling. "Mom, Dad, I am not alone anymore." Ethan bent down, his voice soft but resolute, tender as a vow, "And you will never be alone again." The story closes with the warm lights of the Harbor Light Center, but the message remains open. When evil pushes us into darkness, kindness lights the way. Karen and Robert have paid the price before the law. Emma has been embraced with love and taught how to stand tall. And Ethan kept the promise he made to a fallen friend and became the family his heart had chosen. That is the final note we want to leave with you. The wicked will be punished, the good will be rewarded, and justice may come late, but it never fails to arrive. Where do you see yourself in this story? In the moment of hurt like Emma, or in the decision to rise again like Ethan? Have you ever witnessed an injustice exposed, or a kind hand reaching out at just the right time? If you had an Emma near you, what would you do today to ease her fear? Tell us your thoughts. because even a single line from you could be the light guiding someone who feels lost. I also want to check in with you. How have you been lately? Did this story bring a lump to your throat at any point? If your day feels a little heavy, I hope this ending gives you a touch of warmth. Our channel will always be here to listen, so please leave a comment, and don't forget to share this video so that more people can hear these heartwarming and healing stories. Thank you for being with us. Every view and every word of feedback you give is the encouragement that keeps us going, so we can continue telling stories that heal, stories that remind us that at the end of the road, the light is always waiting.